We are digging deeper into the racial disparities surrounding swimming.
Nearly 3/4 of Black Americans do not know how to swim. This is according to the USA Swimming Foundation and the University of Memphis. Now, those statistics show the ripple effect segregation and race have had on generations of Black families. Amanda joins us. You've been really digging into this. And Amanda, you started looking into this after learning about a drowning that happened here locally.
Yeah, digging deeper into the disparities after speaking to Hope Bartlett's mother. Now, if that name sounds familiar, Hope was a reporter here in Jacksonville in the late 90s. She died in 1998 while out on a story. She was on a boat on the St. Johns River near the Dames Point Bridge when the boat took a sharp turn, causing everyone to fall overboard. She and the boat's captain died. Hope was 24. The two others on board were pulled from the water by people on a passing shrimp boat. Officials at the time said although Bartlett wore a life jacket most of the day, she had taken it off briefly to tape a segment of her story. Her mother, Elaine, says Hope couldn't swim, and Elaine can't either. That's because Elaine says there wasn't a pool in Green Cove Springs where she could even learn to swim in the 1950s. And this is part of a trend that we see often. The USA Swimming Foundation says that if a parent does not know how to swim, there is only a 13% chance that their child will learn the life-saving skill. Decades of racial segregation and the lack of access to local swimming pools has had a lasting and painful impact. And they are the reason so many barriers are still in place today. St. Augustine is where it happened. It's the nation's oldest city and was one of many locations of protests in the segregated South. It was also referred to as the most lawless city by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He led demonstrations to make sure there were equal rights for all in St. Augustine. It's also where 59 years ago, a now historic swim-in was held. And what happened next shook the country to its core and led to nationwide change. This 1964 picture of Black and white swimmers holding a swim-in, integrating a pool in St. Augustine on a hot June day is a piercing memory of an ugly moment in time. Monson Motor Lodge owner James Brock was so enraged, he grabbed a bottle of acid and threw it into the pool. J.T. Johnson vividly remembers being in the water.
Finally, that didn't get us out of the pool. But eventually, the sheriffs, 2 or 3 of them started jumping in to drag us out. They did.
Johnson and other protesters were later arrested.
They beat us up pretty bad down there. We'd never been in a situation like that.
A week before, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was in their shoes.
King had been arrested about 16 times previously in other southern states in integration demonstrations.
Dr. King was arrested and jailed in front of the steps of the same motel, attempting to eat a meal. That inspired the now historic swim-in.
People said, well, you know, the Monson Motel, which had been the focal point for these demonstrations, it has this small swimming pool. Why don't we have a swim-in there?
Historian David Nolan spends his time sharing the stories of activists who endured the demonstrations. It all started with a meeting inside this dentist's office, owned by Dr. Robert Haling, a St. Augustine civil rights leader.
So this is where the plot for the Monson pool started, in this very room.
Wow. So they literally were sitting in this room.
Yep.
They were sitting in this room.
Against that wall. As the meeting was breaking up, they looked around that room and realized there was not a single person there who knew how to swim. And there was so much tension and violence in St. Augustine at that time that they were not about to go jump in a swimming pool.
Nolan says it's the reason swimmers came down from Georgia. Thomas Jackson, president of the St. Augustine Historical Society, remembers the lack of access as a child. Back then, swimming in large holes used for construction projects known as burrow pits was commonplace.
Every year we lost somebody in the burrow pits. They drowned, and it was dangerous to swim there.
We had a YMCA with a swimming pool, but that was for whites only at the time. We had a whole lot of motels here with swimming pools. Those were for whites only.
The image from that swim-in showing the late Mimi Jones and Brenda Darden. Jones screaming from the fumes of that acid, and Darden visibly shaken, reminding them Black Americans were not welcome.
I know my mom is happy that I'm here.
Darden's daughter, Cheryl Jones, recently came down from Atlanta to see where the old pool used to be for the first time.
I was a little angry earlier because just thinking about what she had to go through, and why she had to go through it, just because of the color of her skin. It just brings it all full circle.
Johnson knew that the acid was used as a pool cleaner and remembers calming the group.
I want to show them that they were going to be all right. And they started to relax a little bit.
Those images making headlines nationwide helped lead to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Dr. King, seen here, threw up the victory sign shortly after the bill's signing.
The development of this development is merely the first step in a long journey toward freedom and justice in St. Augustine.
Nearly 60 years later, a Hilton now sits in place of the Monson, a place Johnson still visits occasionally.
I go down there. I would swim in that pool, but I go down there sometimes. Yeah.
You do? You go swimming in that pool that's now the Hilton?
Yeah, I do.
How does it feel?
It kind of tickles me. I just laugh about it,
A plaque in the steps where Dr. King was arrested memorializes that moment in history. And despite this turning point in the civil rights movement, there still wasn't complete equality in the water. Nationwide, public pools began to dwindle and private swim clubs continued to shut out Black people. Children's show host Fred Rogers highlighted the issue in 1969 by sharing a wading pool with Officer Clemens, who's Black, in this episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was a simple yet meaningful gesture aimed at breaking down the color barrier.
This morning, we are digging deeper into the disparities the Black community faces when it comes to swimming here in Northeast Florida.
So it was a skill that was largely denied to Black Americans, especially in the segregated South. Amanda's joining us now. And Amanda, you spoke with two people who were some of Jacksonville's first Black swimmers, including one of the city's first Black lifeguards.
Absolutely, I did. So they told me what it was like learning to swim when there was no pool for Black people in the city. It really gives more insight into how Jacksonville's past creates a ripple effect with drowning rates today. It's also an eye-opening look at just how much it took for the Black community here in Jacksonville to even get a pool. "87-year-old Warner Singleton learned to swim in metal water tanks on philanthropist Eartha White's property on Moncrief Road in the late 1940s.
And then they had a big tank like your above the ground pools are now, but only it was just one level, one depth.
These metal tanks, which historians say were also used for baptisms, were some of the few options for Black Americans in Jacksonville during segregation. Another place where Black children could swim was part of a city trash site called Brown's Dump. It was a reservoir full of chemicals on Pierce Street near the old Mary McLeod Bethune Elementary School.
All of it was polluted.
84-year-old Pearl White remembers children getting in that water.
The kids didn't really know anything about polluted water and what it could do to your skin. Even if you swallowed some or if you inhaled some, could do to your lungs or any of your other bodily organs.
The city pool in the Springfield neighborhood, which first opened in 1922, was whites only.
We never went. We were afraid.
White says the racial tensions were palpable.
In the back of your mind, you always got that little feeling that something might happen to me over here if I'm over here.
Clemson University professor and Jacksonville native Abel Bartley wrote a book on the city's past and says local leaders drew a hard line in the sand when it came to the water.
What you have then is a long history of African Americans being denied access to things that are important. And water was one of the defining lines.
Efforts to change that started in 1948 when Councilman Claude Smith promised Black community leaders the city would build them a pool if they voted for him instead of the Black candidate.
One of the things that they had argued for since the 1940s was that they wanted a swimming pool, a place for their kids to go, particularly during the summer months.
Smith won the election, and the pool on Jefferson Street was built shortly after in 1951.
And on the first day, it was loaded.
So you were here when this pool first opened?
I was here.
This was an outlet for us that was safe for you to be.
Singleton and White climbed the ranks, getting certification after certification right here at the pool.
All we thought about was training other people to become swimmers. And every time you turn around, somebody was in there struggling. It's from the beginning. After a while, it became less and less and less because, you know, more people were learning how to do it.
Do you think the pool contributed to more Black children learning to swim?
Definitely, definitely. We had swim lessons every morning from 10 to 12. This place would be packed.
Singleton says the Jefferson Street pool did more than just create swimmers.
This whole thing was like very, very, I guess you'd say, enlightening and making us want to be people. We wanted to be more than what we was here.
He eventually became co-captain of the Jefferson Street Swim Club, the city's first Black swim team. White was on the first women's team. Did you think you were making Black history at that time?
No, we were just having fun. And there wasn't any other Black teams for us to participate against anyway, so we had to compete with each other. And it was just fun.
A key figure in training swimmers, Jacksonville's first Black aquatics director, Julius Ginyard, a man who spent countless hours mentoring neighborhood kids at the pool, which also doubled as a recreation center. Julius Ginyard was a huge part of this pool.
Let me just tell you, without Julius Ginyard, a lot of people would not be who they are. That's what he was. He was a big father-type figure to these people out here.
The pool is now named after him. Despite the progress made by having the Jefferson Street pool in the neighborhood, Bartley says the stain of segregation surrounding swimming pools continues to create a ripple effect in the Black community. Most Black Americans still don't know their way around the water.
Being able to swim versus not being able to swim, that was one of the things that put one group in a superior position and another group in an inferior position. And there's never been an incentive to make up for the ground that was lost.
Singleton is hopeful, especially seeing that the Jefferson Street pool is still here after all these years. So what's going through your mind now that you see the pool here all of these years later?
I feel, I don't know, I just feel good just to be here to see that this thing has still survived. When I walked in, I just felt a warm feeling that, hey, I was a part of this whole mechanism that went here from the beginning.
A full circle moment and a look at how pushing for equality in the water here in Jacksonville came to be. And meeting for our first interview was the first time Singleton had seen the Jefferson Street pool in 25 years. He and White still swim even in their 80s.
One Florida mother is working with state lawmakers to help protect more children after she lost her own.
She is on a mission. Her 5-year-old son drowned while on a camp field trip. Amanda spoke with her, and this is part of a troubling trend, Amanda, specifically affecting the Black community.
Absolutely. And we all know that drowning does not discriminate, but Black children are 3 times more likely to drown than white children, according to the CDC. Keisha Reese's 5-year-old son, Kareem, is part of this troubling statistic. And after getting that devastating phone call, Reese is now more determined than ever to make sure children statewide are safe in the water. Keisha Reese remembers her son, Kareem Green, as a child full of energy.
Kareem loved dinosaurs. He was playful, happy, just his smile was everything.
17 years ago, Reese experienced her worst nightmare. She says she got a phone call from Kareem's summer camp. Hello? Telling her to go to the hospital.
He wasn't moving, so at that moment, I knew something was wrong.
5-year-old Kareem drowned while on a field trip.
I don't care what happened. You know, I feel supervising him should have been done. Something went wrong.
Kareem didn't know how to swim. At the time, Reese didn't know either. She says that inability was passed down from her mother.
My mom didn't know, but she was working and it really wasn't important to her because she didn't take us to swimming lessons. She didn't take us, much to the beach and everywhere. So that's what happened to us.
It's a common experience for Black families nationwide. Studies show 64% of Black children still don't know how to swim.
You start to see a disparity that has everything to do with segregation.
State Representative Kevin Chambliss says past discrimination still affects Black communities when it comes to the water.
From a cultural standpoint, we learned a lot of things, but water recreation began to not necessarily be a cultural norm in Black communities because Black communities weren't given access to the water recreation that were in the cities that we were living in.
So how can we turn these numbers around to stop children from drowning?
We have to take the cost away because I think that by having there being a cost associated with that, then you're going to have an economic gap between different communities on who knows how to swim and who doesn't.
Reese is doing just that through the Team Kareem Foundation. She offers free swim lessons and CPR classes statewide.
I stand behind C, which is supervision, education, and environment. You need to supervise first, educate yourself, whether it be CPR, swimming lessons, lifeguard training.
She's also working with Chambliss on a water safety bill. It would require child care facilities to have written permission from parents for water-related activities and life jackets for children who can't swim.
If they would have asked me those questions, or if they would have had life jackets on the premises, Kareem would have been here.
The bill will also have prevention methods for children who do wander off, as well as it will have certain training programs that would be given.
Reese is hoping the changes will end the dangerous cycle. As a mother, what message do you have for families who have just not made swimming a priority?
You could stop it. Like right now, you don't have to do what your mom, your grandma did. You know, you can start with your kids. Let's stop this generational curse. Please, you're hearing it from me, a mother that has lost her child. Make it a priority. Talk about swimming.
And Representative Chambliss says the water safety bill will be the first bill he files when the legislature is back in session. And he says he plans to work with key stakeholders like the YMCA and the Department of Children and Families. Reese plans to travel frequently to Tallahassee to hopefully see the bill become law. Of course, she's always working year-round through the Team Kareem Memorial Foundation. And you can learn more about that foundation on our website at news4jax.com.
We are digging deeper into the history of swimming in the Black community and how exclusion in the past has had a ripple effect that still affects people today.
It comes as the Consumer Product Safety Commission calls for more drowning prevention efforts this summer. The agency's newest report found Black children made up 21% of the drownings where a child's race was listed. 45% of those deaths among Black children were kids between 5 and 14 years old. For perspective, Black Americans only make up 13% of the American population. Amanda has been looking into this and joins us as part of her series. Amanda, a woman in Jacksonville is working to change those numbers.
She is, and her name is Joyce DeLifis. Her foundation has a specific goal to get more Black families in the water in honor of her late son, Sean. Known as the stroke doctor for his excellent form, Sean DeLifis trained Olympic athletes and was beloved in the community. And now, several years after his untimely death, Joyce is getting even more people in the pool this summer, including a principal, most of his school, and a city councilman.
Yes!
Joyce DeLifis spends every Saturday on this pool deck at the Johnson Family YMCA.
Come on, kick!
Her passion, making sure Jacksonville's Black community knows their way around the water.
From 8 in the morning to 5 in the evening, all day long. That's my goal.
She has the Sean D. DeLifis Foundation, inspired by her late son, a beloved swim coach who trained Olympic athletes.
Sean was a big jokester. The kids loved him.
Sean died at 30 years old from natural causes in 2016. Since the foundation's start shortly after his death, more than 1,300 children and adults learned how to swim for free.
It means that that's 1,300 that the families won't have to walk behind at a funeral procession. That's what it means to me personally, because I walked behind my son and the lasting effects. It lasts for years and years.
With drowning rates historically higher among Black children than any other race, Joyce also made sure this year students saw more representation in the pool.
It's very important for a 4-year-old Black young man to walk on deck and see a lifeguard that looks like him. It makes him want to swim harder. It makes him want to get in the water and do what he got to do.
Now in year 6, Joyce is doubling the number of people learning to swim this summer from 150 to 300, focusing on getting more Black Americans in the water. She also took her message to principal of Becoming Collegiate Academy, Cameron Frazier. Frazier and most of his school, 53 students and some of their parents, are getting in the water this summer. What do you hope people learn from seeing you out here getting in the water?
And a lot of my students at my school do not know how to swim. And it was important for me as the leader of our community to, 1, encourage them to learn, and 2, to jump in the water with them and to become more confident in the water as a swimmer.
Frazier's students say they're excited to learn something new.
It feel good to learn how to swim because you can save people's lives.
You're gonna jump off, I'm gonna cannonball, and then I'm gonna cover my nose and put these on so I can see.
By the end of his first lesson, Frazier eventually made it to the deep end of the pool with help from a paddleboard and his swim instructor.
Mr. Frazier, you can do it. Come on, Mr. Frazier. Come on, kid. I was so excited I could scream.
Councilman Reggie Gaffney Jr. is also taking lessons for the first time after reaching out to Joyce earlier this year.
Hey, so I'm excited. You know, I'm a little bit nervous.
Gaffney says at 38 years old, he finally wants to learn the life-saving skill.
I never want to be at the mercy of someone else. You know, so I want to put myself in a position when I can save someone else.
He remembers water-related activities not really being much of an option growing up.
Being on the north side, there's not many swimming pools. You know, the affordability of it, the access, the representation, you know, it was never a priority. It was never, I was never inspired by someone to learn how to swim.
Joyce says both men are becoming that inspiration to children and adults by taking this step.
Those 2 men will touch thousands, and the word will get out that it's okay. You don't have to be afraid.
She says although she lost her only child, she's gained so many through what's become her life's work.
What keeps you going?
All these children belong to me. I know they come here with their parents, their biological parents, but I feel like I gave birth to each one of these children on the deck. That keeps me going, and it makes me know that my son is so proud of what I am doing. They all belong to me.
Well, the Sean D. DeLifis Foundation, they have a graduation ceremony for all the participants at the end of the summer, with city leaders presenting medals to all of those participants. And by the way, it's free to fill out an application and take these classes. There is a wait list, though. The city just approved funding to help the foundation pay for even more lessons next year.